Hello and welcome to tutorial 1.5. Assignment 1.5 offers you the quote by Nietzsche: "To be truthful means to employ the usual metaphors. This is the duty to lie according to a fixed connection." Then the question asks to very clearly explain one of the arguments that leads Nietzsche to this claim. That can be maybe loosely interpreted. I'll go through some examples in the tutorial. You could say possibly what one of the arguments that leads to Nietzsche's claim, one of the arguments that is connected to Nietzsche's claim, one of the arguments that supports Nietzsche's claim. There's maybe a few ways to look at it. Just a disclaimer at the beginning, this is not the only way to answer this assignment or any assignment in the course. This is I think a good outline to answer this question and a clear way to answer this question. Just one example. As always, I'm beginning with an introduction. Just sort of introduce what you're going to be talking about in the first paragraph and splitting up the answer into paragraphs. The first paragraph, say in the assigned quote, Nietzsche is describing his main argument, which is this. Okay, the quote is sort of a main argument, you could say, or one of the main arguments, something like this. And then I'm going to summarize the quote. So in the assigned quote, Nietzsche is describing his main argument, that language and cultural concepts, the usual metaphors, are conventional truths, not eternal capital T truths. That's my kind of summary of this quote. One of his supporting arguments for the central claim is that blank. So I'm saying supporting arguments. You could say one of the arguments that leads to it. You could say multiple things here, and I'll go through those. So you want to introduce one of the connected arguments, okay? So the main argument or the quoted argument, and then a connected argument. Now, paragraph 2, I would explain the supporting argument, and then paragraph 3, maybe continue explaining in a different way. And I'll go through why in the tutorial. First, just a note, as I said in the previous tutorial, try not to summarize the reading. If you're saying things like, first Nietzsche wrote, next Nietzsche says, this was to show something, this led to, then you wrote something. Okay, that is indicating, and then you have just one monolithic paragraph. That is indicating that you're aiming for a reading comprehension answer instead of an argument comprehension answer. Argument comprehension shows that you understand the premise and how they support the conclusion. An example that I gave in the last tutorial, you're saying rocks exist, and then the support for that, maybe we can see the rocks, we can touch the rocks. Okay, how would you summarize that argument? Let's say this person, Rocky, wrote this argument. Okay, Rocky's main argument is that rocks exist. You're introducing the main argument, and then Rocky supported her argument using two premises: see rocks, touch rocks. Okay, now explain the first supporting argument. People see rocks, and then the final paragraph, the second way Rocky supported argument was people touch rocks. Going back to assignment 1.5. That introductory paragraph. In the assigned quote, Nietzsche is describing a main argument, some kind of argument, okay? And then one argument that leads to the central claim is connected to it, supports it, something like this. You're going to put that one connected argument there. You're going to explain, and I think explain with one more paragraph. So let's look at this. What is this main argument? Let's explain that in more detail. Let's sort of break down the quote, essentially. To be truthful means to employ the usual metaphors. What's the usual metaphors? Okay. Usual metaphors, he's talking about, are conventional categories. Metaphors are comparisons, they're usual, they're conventional, they're old, they've been set up for you, okay? They're conventional categories. All right, now this is the duty to lie according to a fixed connection. What's the duty? Duty's sort of this expectation that others have of you. It's a duty in the sense that it's this moral obligation fostered on you, okay, to to follow conventions. Don't break the conventions. And what's this lie? What does he mean by lie? Well, he's sort of being ironic here, I think. And what's Plato's saying the truth is the forms and maybe the form of virtue, but Nietzsche's saying those are social. It's an invention. That's a social invention. That's a social convention. And if it's a convention, if it's an invention, it's something like a lie. So Plato's truth is actually a lie. This is the ironic thing maybe that Nietzsche's pointing out. And then what's a fixed connection? It's fixed, meaning it's been there for a while. It's set up set in stone, sort of, and it's a connection. It's this metaphor. So again, you're talking about conventional categories. All of these connections that are made create a category. They're conventional. Truthful, when he's saying to be truthful is getting along with others, right? Telling the truth is just you're following conventions. You're not stirring the pot, so to speak. So how could you potentially translate this quote? So he used flowery, flamboyant language, but let's just try to break it down. To be truthful means to use conventional categories. We do this because other people expect us to follow their conventions, expect us or feel that we have a duty, whatever, to follow their conventions, okay? That's how I'm breaking down the quote. So I think it makes sense when you are writing the assignment, maybe to put the quote into your own words so you show that you understand it. This is just one example of how I translate the quote. So in the assigned quote, Nietzsche is describing his main argument, or a main argument in the reading, that language and cultural concepts, the usual metaphors, are conventional truths, not eternal, capital T truths, as Plato suggests. Okay, now I'm adding as Plato suggests. You may want to add something like that. Up to you. One of his supporting arguments for the central claim is what? So now, again, what's the supporting argument? Nietzsche argues explain the supporting argument, and then maybe connect the supporting argument to the main argument in the third paragraph. That's a possibility. So let's look at what could your supporting argument be. I'm going to go through 2 examples and then we're done here. So again, we're very clearly explaining one of the supporting arguments or connected arguments or leading arguments, okay? Let's look at this kind of literally. Let's just do a literal reading of the text before that page 3 quote. So we have to remember that Nietzsche's, as the lecture suggests, Nietzsche's responding to Plato. Plato said that words like virtue represent these eternal forms. Nietzsche says language, contrasting Plato, language is just this construction, this thing that we construct. So it's not the forms that construct the individual things, it's the individual things that construct the forms that we have, these categories that we have, these fixed conventions that we have. Language summarizes, so this is going through the reading pretty much. Language summarizes how we come to relate to things for the sake of convenience. It's a convenience thing. It's not a eternal truth kind of thing. All right. Page 2, here's some little snippet quotes. He's saying stuff like languages are a bunch of arbitrary assignments that we assign these similarities between dissimilar things. There's arbitrary differentiations that we make, one-sided preferences that we have. Some languages have gendered objects, or I don't know, there are all kinds of gender things, it doesn't matter. So what is he saying there? That language is sort of arbitrary, it's based on preferences. Those are things that you could talk about. The existence of various languages shows that words are not truth. So there's not just the Greek language. There's not just the idea of Greek arete or excellence or virtue. There's other languages, there's other concepts, and then that shows that there's no like one truth or forms, okay? That's also on page 2. He's talking about various languages. Language removes us from the thing in itself, or the pure truth. That's also on page 2. Or he's saying that when we make all these connections, we're getting further away from understanding the thing for itself, in itself, not with all of these connections that other people have made or that have been culturally made and sort of forced upon us, so that we can only view things in a certain way, and maybe that's harmful. Maybe we view a different gender in a certain way, and we create these genders. These genders are created categories. So now you can challenge the gender categories. You know, with Nietzsche's view, you can challenge these conventional things, these conventional ways of looking at things, and that really set off a lot of the modern world. What Nietzsche's saying here, that's really important. Language disconnects us from the things in themselves. Words offer only metaphors for things, he's also saying. Creating concepts removes us from a fresh and artistic perspective. So we become something like imitators, not innovators. So there's this view that it's better to be this intuitive, artistic person creating your own connections between things if you need to, or so being your own mind, thinking for yourself about how things would be best connected, not necessarily having those things forced upon you. Concepts just are equating unequal things, and they're sort of airbrushing these differences away. And those are all things that are said leading up to the quote. You could say that they support the argument in the quote. So let's look back at this introductory paragraph. So we're saying, breaking down, summarizing the quote here in the first sentence, and then one of the supporting arguments, we could call it a supporting argument, for this central claim is that language generalizes and thus hides specificity. Okay, something like this, you know, summarize the supporting argument. Now you can explain that supporting argument. How do you explain that? How does the supporting argument then, in the third paragraph, how does the supporting argument connect to the main argument or the argument in the quoted argument? What's another way to answer this question? It's sort of an implied way, a way that was discussed in the lectures. You're going to have to kind of modify the way that you answer the question, but I think this is another strong possibility for answering. Nietzsche is revising Plato's cave allegory. This is from the lectures. He accepts that life is full of these kind of shadow illusions, similar to what Plato's saying. He doesn't say this, but it's sort of implied, all right? To him, the shadows are something like the conventions and the categories, the fixed metaphors. That's the shadows, okay? And then the prisoners, you could say, are the rational and conventional people. Maybe the rational people are even the puppeteers. They create the conventions that conventional people follow. And then, yeah, you're just looking at these created images. Escaping the cave requires being intuitive. At the last page of the reading, the last paragraph roughly of the reading, he discusses the difference between being intuitive and being rational. This is also in the lectures. And yeah, the intuitive person is escaping the cave. They have that fresh perspective, that artistic perspective. They interpret things for themselves. You know, they don't allow convention to dictate how they live their life or how they interpret things. Intuitive people leave behind the truth, lies, whatever it may be. Nietzsche calls it different things. Supposed truth that conventions relay to us. Nietzsche was like a very kind of early version of a hippie. You know, he's got this interesting mustache. He liked to be different. So now we have second possible type of answer. In the assigned quote, Nietzsche is describing one of his main arguments. He sort of summarized the quote however you want to do that. This is just mine. Don't copy it word for word, just an idea. And then this main idea, this quoted idea, is connected to, okay? I know that the assignment says explain one of the arguments that leads to Nietzsche's claim, but I think you can kind of loosely say you can write an argument or an idea that's connected to this claim. All right, so this quoted idea is connected to Nietzsche's broader point that Plato's allegory of the cave is erroneous, is wrong, is incorrect, something, okay? Now, I don't know how you would want to do this. Maybe there's just one paragraph following this. You could say something along the lines of Nietzsche's implicitly sort of offering his own allegory of the cave. You could explain that. You can talk about the intuitive versus rational or conventional people.